Builders ready? Go.
This marks the beginning of the 5th qualifying build. We are bringing you a great overhead shot that's new to this year. You just saw it. It gives you such a good look at how these builders work their way around the engines through the course of this engine build.
So as Brian was talking about, the first component, Jimmy, is in. Everything else now is up to you and how you want to play it from here.
And probably most importantly, keep your composure. We talk about this being a competition, but it's also very much a family and team aspect of this, even if you're not competing. So John Boydston, 2-time champion of this event from Hendrick Motorsports, came over to Gage Wenzel right before the opening horn sounded and said, "Gage, remember to breathe." That's most important. We hear it frequently yelled out throughout the competition to tell competitors to breathe, because it becomes so intense and you're focused so intently on the task at hand that oftentimes something as simple as remembering to breathe and stay calm becomes no longer second nature.
Great advice from one of our most intense competitors of all time, John.
And there's a lot on the line for these builders. They want the bragging rights for the Hendrick Automotive Group certified master technicians. They want to be able to go back to their hometown, celebrate a win here in the Randy Dorton Hendrick Engine Builder Showdown. But on top of that, remember, each member from this year's winning build team received one of the incredible Napa toolboxes that are on set with us today. In addition, the runners-up take home one of the versatile mobile Napa tool carts featured in the Valvoline Engine Shop. So we want to thank Napa again for their support of this year's competition. You can learn more at napaonline.com.
And those toolboxes from the folks at Homac, they are absolutely stunning. Jimmy, you spotted something?
It looks like we were having an issue over here in the red engine lane. Chris Roberds in that main cap, number 1, as they are in order. They are having an issue getting it to seat down on top of the crank. They've pulled it off. Jim Bliss is now asked for a timeout. It looks like the crank did not set properly. Maybe Roger and Brian over the Valvoline Engine Shop can take a little closer look and explain what they're trying to look at here in that main cap number 1, and just the order of how these caps have to go on.
Yes, there is an order starting from the front of the engine, and number 1 is the one that's giving them a fit there. We may be able to do an instant replay here in a second, but it doesn't take a whole lot to get this apparatus cocked, and maybe even the bearing started to fall out. Brian, what do you think?
It looks like that's what Jim was trying to do, is push that bearing in there. It's a 2-piece bearing, and one part sits down in the actual block, the other part sits up into that main cap, and if something falls out and then they try to pop it down really hard, it can kick that sideways, so it's really hard to see what that's going to look like.
We do want to remind our viewers that the engines are identical on each of the build floors, both the blue and the red, and we've seen fast times from both sides of the build floor.
And it is a full-blown race engine. This is a NASCAR Chevy R07 engine that you would see in competition in NASCAR racing in the Cup Series. I was also talking to Kevin Weber about that yesterday. It's amazing how long the lifespan, Roger, is of the components that we're using in our Hendrick Engine Builder Showdown. Kevin was telling me he's been using basically the same block since 2014, but that some of the components that we utilize with the build have been changed out, and then maybe going into next year's event, he'll go for a full freshen up of components, but the blocks will stay.
Yeah, so true. We were trying to guess how many cycles that these engines have gone through, but they are tough. There's no question about that. Jimmy, I think we're going to check in with you on the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Joined by a special guest from Racing America. Hopefully you're watching on Racing America, but
They probably are.
Let's hope so. One of the main reasons, host of the Bull Ring, Alan Dietz, is here. For those who aren't familiar, Racing America is your go-to spot if you are a racing enthusiast.
Yeah, we've had more Cup Series content on Racing America this year, and in 2024 we're going to have even more that goes along with our short track coverage, our grassroots races. All you have to do is subscribe. If you go to Racing America, you can subscribe now, and you get to see a lot of that exclusive content. And you got editorial and TobyChristie.com, and a great job he does covering the Cup Series. And as I said, we want to continue to cover the grassroots as we have, and whether it was PASS or ASA Stars this year or ACT, Northwest Super Late Model Series, we had a lot of great series this year and a lot of great races, and looking forward to it again next year.
Now, for me personally, once the Cup season ends, the next big event is right here, the Randy Dorton Engine Builder Showdown. The next big event, if you're a big racing enthusiast, the Snowball Derby. That's coming up in early December.
Yeah, and first off, this is awesome. I've seen it here, the last couple of years and haven't been able to see it in person. And this is just amazing what these guys do, and the coverage. You guys are doing a great job. But we'll actually have the Turkey Derby coming up Thanksgiving weekend for the modifieds, which you're familiar with up in your neck of the woods, which is not the same as my neck of the woods. But we go a little bit further down south to the Snowball Derby. Our coverage starts Tuesday, November the 28th with the kickoff party at Hooters, and it goes all the way through, I think it's December the 2nd, Sunday, December the 2nd, the 56th Annual Snowball Derby. And you got guys you know very well, like William Byron will be there, Eric Jones, Ryan Priest from the Cup Series, and then you got Ty Majeski, Carson Hosfar, and all these great guys from the world of short track racing. And right now, if you go to Racing America, you get 20% off with your early bird special, and I encourage you to do it because it is a ton of racing, which kind of eases that transition through Christmas to New Year's once we get going again.
Well, thanks for joining us. If you're not watching Racing America, or if you're not familiar with grassroots racing, please check out Racing America to learn more. And don't let Alan fool you. He's from the North Myrtle Beach.
Well done. I was going to say the very southern part of New Jersey. Yeah. Hey, they talk a lot about old 7-time around here,
Yeah.
Jimmy Johnson, of course. Well, joining us today is old 103. Greg Anderson is here with us as well. On the other side over there at the Valvoline Engine Shop.
Greg Anderson, welcome back to the Valvoline Engine Shop, our driver of the Hendrick Cars.com dragster Pro Stock. You guys use V8 engines as well, but I think they go through a little more pressure and and who knows, let's call it abuse.
Probably that, but they're probably not built for durability like these engines are. We got to stay together for 6 seconds, Roger. That's it. So
that's it.
That's all you need from them.
So how often do you rebuild them?
Well, in a Pro Stock engine, we can generally get 40, 50 runs down the racetrack before we have to rebuild them. Knock on wood, that's barring, no catastrophe.
Okay.
But, on the flip side, we have Top Fuel and Funny Car that rebuild them every run. Basically, between rounds at an NHRA race, your Top Fuel Funny Car guys, it looks exactly like what we see here. They have 55 minutes between rounds to tear that engine completely down, fix whatever's bad, back together and running, and back to the starting line in 55 minutes. So any of you guys out here who got any interest in Top Fuel racing or Funny Car racing, you're getting warmed up today for it. So come on to California with us.
That's incredible. So on this particular engine, in most V8s, the weak link typically is pointed out to be the valve train. Is that the same for your V8 engines?
Well, it can be anything, Roger, from top to bottom. We certainly have valve train issues. We have bottom end issues one time, and that's really what hurts an engine builder. If you lose the bottom end, we take it personally.
Sure.
That's something we don't expect to happen. So it can happen. It is a race engine, as I said, and things can go wrong, things can break. So you just have to find a way to minimize those mistakes. And as I said yesterday, the goal certainly for us is not to throw an engine together in 22 minutes. It's great that we can, and it shows how great of mechanics these guys are, but we want to spend time on these things, make sure there is no problem, no mistakes made, because mistakes cost you races, and that's not acceptable.
Speaking of, you've got one more national event, right, for the season?
I do.
We don't need any engine failure for sure.
We need no engine failure, no driver failure, no crew failure, no nothing. Yes, we're going to California tonight, Raj, and tomorrow we'll be on track. Last race of the year, we've got a shot. It's a slim shot. We've got a shot at the championship, so big weekend for me, and hopefully we can find a way to make a miracle happen and bring home a championship for Hendrick cars.
Well, listen, our whole audience is rooting for you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
And Greg, if I'm not mistaken, this will be title number 6 you would get as a driver. You already have 3 as well as a crew chief. That's amazing. What a career.
Thank you very much, Ralph. It's been a good run, and you know what? I don't want to quit yet. I want to keep her going.
It's been a good run, but a short run, 6 seconds at a time. And he's got a spot in the Hall of Fame just waiting for whenever he's done.
We continue to watch our builders in qualifying build number 5. We are hitting the 9-minute mark, and I know Jimmy, in yesterday's qualifying builds, we started to see oil pans go on about 9:30, 9:45. Are we looking like we're on pace with that with these two teams?
I think we're just a step behind that right now, depending on how these builds are going, but it looks as though we've had some issues. There's a compression ring that needs to go onto the cylinder head, or excuse me, onto the piston when it goes into the chamber. So we've seen that fall off a couple times, at least in the red lane. So it's something it's difficult, and it's not the same compression sleeve that they use up top the hill as you often hear, which is where the engine shop is located on the Hendrick Motorsports campus. So that has slowed down the build just a hair, but still a pretty incredible pace. Especially, I've been able to focus on the red engine and seeing that this is Gage's first build in this competition. A very steady pace for a rookie.
And again, that's Gage from Hendrick Motorsports, his partner Chris from Honda Cars of McKinney on the red build lane. And then on the blue build floor, we have Tom Karras and Keith Hardis.
There you go. You can't switch besides.
I can only imagine, Jimmy, what the learning curve has been like for Gage, working up in the engine shop here with guys like Danny and Scott and Sam and Tom and all the geniuses that work up in that building up there. Over 500 wins now. I think it's 506 wins for the engine shop.
It's an incredible wealth of knowledge. It's basically a walking library over there from all the years of experience, and you think all the checkered flags that this organization has brought home because...
We got time going again here, Jimmy. We got a call of time. Jim Bliss looking at things on the red engine again.
Yeah, and it's still in the same area toward that front part of the engine. It's hard to tell with this angle, obviously with Jim Bliss there, the official, and then the support team also being on site there, including Kevin Weber overseeing. It's hard to get a good angle at this point of what they're specifically looking at. But it's still, I think it was toward the front part of that engine. I don't know if it was still an issue with the crank or...
I know, right?
Here's a replay. We're taking a look at it here. Brian, what are you spotting?
It looks like as they're putting the pistons in, it could be the same scenario with those two-piece bearings, with the bearing that sits in the connecting rod itself versus the rod cap. If that potentially came out or slipped in the process of trying to pull that in and out, if that doesn't sit in there just right again, oil flow or potential catastrophic failure could occur.
I think
looks like we're back at it.
Yeah, I think what I saw was more related to the piston rings. They seem like they didn't get compressed enough to go into that cylinder bore. And they were talking yesterday about the engine shop here versus these pistons and rings. These rings have a lot more tension on them. So I don't think these guys are quite used to that. But that ring compressor is a machine collar, as you've seen, and it's supposed to make it easier. But man, if you don't have it seated right on the engine block, it could get sideways on you real quick.
An oil pan going on in blue lane.
740.
Put this one on. You're okay. It's on your way. Good. Go.
Getting a look at our blue team in action here. Tom Karras, Keith Hardis.
Gotta go put the starter on. I got it.
There you can hear the communication between Tom and his partner telling him exactly what the next step is. So there's little idle time as possible.
Nope, there it goes. It's a blue handle, speed handle underneath.
Get that starter on, get the oil pan tightened down. We will see an engine flip. Here we go.
There we go. So Tom and Keith flipping their engine. These teams are not going head-to-head, just racing the clock, trying to be one of the top 2 times to move on to the championship build.
Keith Hardis is going to be hustling to get done over there because I know he'd probably like to go chat with Greg Anderson. Keith is a big drag racing guy. In fact, he loves to drive a Pro Mod drag car, which, if you know anything about drag racing, Pro Mod is pretty darn serious piece of machinery. So I can imagine he'd really like to go over there and chat with Greg Anderson a little bit and share some tips about working on the engine and behind the wheel as well.
Flip over your struts. Get the head over. Good.
Roger, we hear them talking about putting the struts on. For those that are maybe watching on our broadcast for the first time going, struts, what does that have to do with an engine? The struts are not a part of the performance of the engine, but a part of the safety of our engine building contest.
Absolutely are, and I'll tell you what, you make a good point because we did have a penalty yesterday on one of the struts not being fastened here. So if we can get a shot here in the engine room, we can show you one of these struts is actually associated with the engine stand. We can show it without turning it over, Brian, but this stabilizes. You have 2 of these, one on each side. This stabilizes the engine so we can start it up without it trying to torque steer on us. So critical to have those in place for safety, and also it's a penalty if you don't.
Now we get to the stage, maybe the most crucial and intricate part that we saw yesterday during the builds that some of the more experienced builders even had trouble with, and that is this cam sensor and the timing of the engine. So you will see over in the red lane, Gage was adjusting the crank to try to get the pistons into the right position. They want the first piston to be rising, and then they want the third piston to be flush to the top. And that gives them a 50-50 shot of when they drop that cam sensor in, that it is the correct position for timing. If that is not in the correct timing, and there's a yellow line inside of a little window they have to stare through, if that is not correct, the engine will not fire. So this is a part of the build that oftentimes teams are trying to make up time, but they can't race through it too quickly and risk making a mistake on this crucial part of the build.
Yeah.
That's the component right there where I start throwing tools.
Yeah.
Telling you right
Be a
now,
frustrating one.
it would drive me crazy.
The gap between the 2 teams predicted is about 1.5 minutes.
You good?
We are just hitting the 16.5 minute mark in this qualifying build.
Kim, that gap just came down to 48 seconds.
Yeah, teams can find lots of different ways to make up time. Jimmy, do you get the sense that on red build floor, we've talked about Gage being a first-time engine
Grab it
builder
down.
in this
Quarter-inch
showdown from
drive.
Hendrick Motorsports. The dynamic may be a little bit different than we see with maybe Danny and his partner or Scott Vester and his partner.
Well, the advantage, too, of having Chris Roberds, this is his third build. We mentioned he's a runner-up from his competition in 2017. He's actually pointed out a couple times to Gage that, hey, I haven't finished tightening these yet, give me a second, or I need this wrench. So the communication's going back and forth. It's more of a two-way communication as opposed to maybe in some scenarios where we might have a rookie builder from the automotive group is more listening and getting the instructions. You commented yesterday how amazing it is that oftentimes the Hendrick Motorsports competitor will take a lead scenario where they're not only focused on their task, but through the peripheral vision, they're looking to see what their teammate is doing and able to keep them on task as well. What I've noticed, though, we've had 2 pauses in this build, and that might have been an advantage for this red lane, with Gage being a rookie builder and Chris also being a veteran builder in his third season or third event, in the fact that they could catch their breath. We heard again John Boydston say, make sure you breathe. I think these pauses might have given them a couple opportunities to regroup, maybe adjust settings and their approach to this build, and we've seen this gap start to shift once these engines have flipped.
You saw the oil going in for Tom and Keith. The reminder, Valvoline, the official lubricants partner for Hendrick Automotive Group and Hendrick Motorsports. They are our presenting sponsor for this broadcast. You can visit Valvoline.com to see how their drive to innovate makes an impact in every product they develop.
And maybe the only part of the build I'm somewhat qualified to do.
Is pouring the oil in?
Somewhat. It's questionable.
Yeah, we definitely can't overlook that oil. Well, there was one competition where the Valley Tray started to go on and the team forgot to put the oil in, and they realized it had to unfasten some nuts they already put in and drop the Valvoline motor oil back into the engine. So it would have been costly trying to fire that engine up without the oil in it.
All right. I would say we're kind of in the third segment of this build. You got heads on, you've got head bolts being torqued. You see the rocker bars and push rods and all of that going in. Those rocker arms have to be torqued as well. They're considered a critical fastener. So this little section here takes quite a little bit of time. There are a lot of moving parts here, right, Brian?
There are, and from that standpoint, I got the chance to talk with Gage a little bit before, with him being a new builder to this. And for those that don't know, he actually came from the drag racing world. So as part of that, one of his roles and responsibility was to do some of the valve train assembly on some of those cars. So we'll see how that experience from his past kind of plays into the speed on which he can get this accomplished today with all those fasteners, push rods, rocker arms, and getting it all tightened and torqued down.
That sounds like a good background. Maybe an advantage.
Hey, Brian, we're only asking this engine to run for 60 seconds here today. Of course, it is a race engine, however. What type of Valvoline oil are we using here today so that we don't have any issues with that 60-second run?
For today's oil, we're using a Valvoline full synthetic. It's a 0.20 viscosity. So it's actually a lot different than what they run in the race engines. Because of what we're asking the oil to do here in these engines, it has to lubricate as well as cool and make it run for that 1 minute. We want to make sure that we have that advanced protection for these engines to make them run for that 60 seconds.
And that's a good point for the audience. You do not see a radiator or a cooling system on these stands. So you're right, Brian, the oil has to lubricate and also cool this engine for 60 seconds.
Just about to hit the 21-minute mark of this qualifying build.
And you've got to be better than at least a 23:58:54 to get inside the top 2, because remember, it's the top 2 that go on to our competition championship build, the heads-up build later on today.
So Scott Vester and Phil Seaton hold the top spot, Danny Emmerich and Bill Sullivan that second spot, and I ran into Scott on the way out yesterday. He does not want Danny to win this competition because currently Scott's got 6 championships in the Showdown. Danny's got 5, so if Danny wins, he will tie for the most championships in the Randy Dorton Hendrick Engine Builder Showdown.
And it doesn't help that they're sitting right next to each other.
Yeah.
Gage, you got one lift or one push rod on your side. You see it down at the bottom?
You hear Jim Bliss there, Jimmy, giving some tips to Gage that he's seeing from the officials' viewpoint there.
Yeah, very similar to what you might see with a linesman in the NFL, right? When the wide receiver lines up, or the gunner for a punt lines up, he'll look over and check with the linesman to make sure that they're not offside to avoid a penalty. Very similar situation here. Jim Bliss can look out and make sure, especially if it's something that could be catastrophic to the engine from a safety consideration, he's more than allowed to. It's not so much assisting, it's just to give some guidance, just to make sure that safety is paramount.
Yeah, we need that engine for 2 more builds today.
We actually had some competitors yesterday. Jimmy, you're talking about Boydston telling these guys, hey, breathe, breathe, breathe. Jim Bliss was actually telling some of the competitors yesterday the same thing as he was watching them. It's like, slow down and make sure you are breathing. These builds are very physical. There's a few of the competitors that have made the comments about, yep, this morning consisted of some extra ibuprofen, and I really can't feel my shoulders and my arms.
Yeah, and we also heard yesterday that special diets going into the builds. Brian Franklin, who was the 4th build of the day, wanted to ensure that he didn't cramp up in the build like he has in the past. So he had plenty of water throughout the day and ensured that he had a banana for the potassium so he didn't cramp up during the build. So while it looks like adult Legos being put together with very expensive pieces that go in specific spots and parts, this is a controlled chaos, and even though they make it look easy, this is more intense than I think most people will ever experience when working on their cars.
A little bit of carb loading last night, maybe, at dinner?
Hopefully some pasta. I think the competitors yesterday who knew that they could come and relax and enjoy it might have had a nice steak and really kick back and relax. But yeah, most likely the competitors coming in today either were too nervous to sleep and eat, or they hopefully had a nice pasta dish to carbo load.
I need it. Top row.
Over in the blue lane, you can continue to hear Tom talking about what's next, what steps, what process needs to happen to make sure that all the fasteners and parts and pieces go in the right order. Because there's some that once, like right now, with the fasteners going on the valve covers, if they don't get those in first and tight, when they put the coil packs on, they can no longer get to those nuts and bolts on that side. And we talk about physical with Tom standing up on the engine stand, reaching over to get this stuff tightened down.
So our Hendrick Automotive Group Master Technicians are in the blue jerseys. So what does it take to become a Hendrick Master? Well, you have to be 2 years continuous employment with Hendrick Automotive Group. You have to get the top training with your OE that you represent in your store. You have to complete the ASE Master level, and also your CSI has to be above target. So very, very elite group here. I think when those valve covers go on, everybody starts to recognize this thing as an engine, right?
It's amazing when they do get the intake and valve covers on, and when the exhaust starts going on, then it's like, ooh, we get to start making some noise this morning.
Plug your ears, it's coming. That's a good shot of a yellow socket there. We were talking with Kevin Weber yesterday, and there are half a dozen different sockets that have to be taken on and off of some of these speed handles. And so they've made it easier by putting these color codes. Right there's a good shot of a white socket. So instead of saying, hey, hand me a 1/2 inch or a 3/8 or a 5/16 or whatever. Now you can just say, hey, Brian, I need a yellow socket. Brian, I need a white socket, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that makes it a lot easier.
It considerably easier and a lot quicker. And again, it's all about the time. And supposedly, it's my understanding that Chris Maroc actually came up with that idea yesterday morning.
He did.
Jimmy, I was watching as we see some headers going on here, watching Chris Roberds with the speed handle. He's one of the best Hendrick Automotive Group technicians I've seen with the speed handle. They don't usually get to work with that tool. It's usually the HMS guys that are more proficient with the speed handle.
And even at that, the speed handles really aren't used on a daily basis, whether you're at Hendrick Motorsports or at the automotive group side. Just from an efficiency standpoint, think about it. If you brought your car in, most likely you want it coming off the lift fixed as quickly as possible. And the most efficient way is to use impact wrenches, power tools. That's what many of these builders are accustomed to, whether you're from HMS or Hendrick Automotive Group. But as you pointed out, Chris Roberts, again, this is his third build, seems very comfortable using the speed handles. Yesterday, it was pointed out, though, that even the speed handles that are down here on the build floor are different than the style of speed handle that many of the HMS competitors use in the engine shop on the Hendrick campus. There's a different end to it. There's a round ball at the end of their speed handles up at the hill. Here, it's just a straight flat end. So it's a different feel. And because of that, some of the Hendrick Motorsports competitors will not use the speed handle trick to get it to automatically, using centrifugal force, continue to spin on its own. They continue to manually adjust throughout the entire rotation. So it's definitely a unique tool. We see it here every year. It's what's one of the many things that makes this event unique and special. And those who can master it, we see Scott Vester and Danny Emmerich are two of the best, and it's because they are the best at that they are currently atop the leaderboard with their teams.
Well, the ones up in the engine shop are probably made out of titanium and carbon fiber, knowing those guys.
In addition, though, Sam Vernatter, his son is actually able to be here, and his son was actually working on the proficiency of that speed handle this morning, so they're starting them young.
Yeah, Brian, he helped with a teardown yesterday. He walked over after, it might have been Sam's build or right before Sam's build, but he walked over with his dad and asked Jim Bliss if he could help with the teardown, and he walked up with his own speed handle, which gave Jim Bliss quite the kick. But it definitely is running in the family. It seems as though they're going to have another racer, and maybe we'll have Sam Vernatter and his son both working at HMS here in the future.
Most
Maybe
kids a ball.
against each other, though.
Yeah, most kids get a ball.
Blue team, power on.
Here we go.
Here we go.
All right, 30, 52, 56.
For the blue
30,
team.
52, 56 for the blue team.
And it's interesting, we talk about all of the different challenges of these builds, and Jimmy, as the blue team was firing their engine, it got so loud in here that Gage and Chris had to elevate their voices to be able to communicate as they worked towards the end of their build.
No, you're not.
We've talked about communication being one of the key essentials to the formula for success, and once that engine fires, not only does it rattle you from a perspective of knowing the competitor across the aisle is a little bit quicker than you, but now, to your exact point, it's hard to talk anymore. So if you're trying to let your teammate know what the next task is, it can be very difficult to communicate.
The winning team gets one of the incredible Napa toolboxes on set with us today. The runners-up, again, get the Napa tool cards featured in the Valvoline engine shop. So again, thank you to Napa for your support. You can visit napaonline.com for more information. There we go.
For the red team, 32, 58, 59.